career in law enforcement.
Welcome back to Eye on the Islands. Joining me now is Acting U.S. Marshal Reggie Bradshaw of the U.S. Marshal Service. We're talking to Marshal Bradshaw about Career Day on April 7th at the UVI Sports and Fitness Complex on St. Thomas, and again on the UVI campus on St. Croix on April 8th. It's a chance for you to gain an exciting career in law enforcement. And here to tell us a little bit more about what that means is Marshal Bradshaw. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Now tell me, what is the U.S. Marshal Service?
Well, the U.S. Marshal Service, unlike my counterpart, DEA, is a multifaceted agency. Of course, our primary objectives are to take care of the protection of the federal judiciary. And then what we're really better known for is the capturing of violent offenders and fugitives. But we're also responsible for the nation's asset forfeiture program. We're responsible for a witness protection program. So we do a variety of different things.
Okay, and when you say take care of the judiciary, what does that mean?
Well, we're responsible for the protection of the federal judiciary, to include the judges, U.S. Attorney's Office, and the whole judicial family, keeping them out of harm's way. Sometimes we often find threats or inappropriate communications because of a number of reasons relative to cases, prosecution, or whatever. A lot of people find themselves upset about the results, and of course that creates some problems for our federal family sometimes.
And so you all work closely with the federal prosecutors then?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned forfeiture assets, yes. Asset forfeiture. What does that entail? Well,
what I mean by the asset forfeiture, the Marshal Service is not a good agency to see coming towards your door. Because normally when we're coming to take something away from you. It's either your family members or your property, your money. We're coming to take stuff. So, and when we do that, that goes into this big pot called the asset forfeiture. And once those cases are resolved, then those funds are expended appropriately.
Okay. And I think the most visible thing that you mentioned that people know the U.S. Marshal Service for is the apprehension of fugitives. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We're looking for the bad guys. Historically, back in the day, the FBI was actually running the fugitive program. And some years ago, the Marshal Service took over that program. And we capture a lot of people. Just don't want to go to jail, or people will be adjudicated in court, but then they won't show up for their sentencing or time to start. So of course the Marshal Service then comes into play, and we have to hunt them down.
So does that take you out of the territory and across state lines?
It does, it sometimes, but now in this innovative age and sharing of information, oftentimes we don't have to necessarily physically respond. We can send what we call collateral leads to other districts within the states to assist us in capturing those fugitives.
Okay. So how many offices nationwide or districts, rather, is the U.S. Marshal Service?
The Marshal Service is comprised of 94 different districts throughout the continental United States and its territories.
And how long have you been a marshal?
I've been a deputy for just a little under 16 years now.
Okay. And what motivated you to join the service?
Actually, what motivated me was prior to my becoming a deputy U.S. Marshal, I was with the United States Marine Corps. Spent 13 years in the Marine Corps, and as I was transitioning, was certainly looking for an agency that kind of mirrored that kind of presence from a uniform perspective, physical fitness kinds of things. And the only thing that parlayed that was really law enforcement. And I came through what they call the Shining Star program, in which the U.S. Marshals were actually recruiting military folks.
Now you guys are going to go out and do some recruiting at UVI. Tell me, what kind of individual are you looking for?
Kind of similar to what, again, my colleague explained. We're looking for high caliber people. The Marshal Service, typically the requirements are basically the same. Initially there wasn't a requirement to have a college degree. However, we are moving towards that direction right now. We're actually in the process of revamping the entire recruiting process. And some of those things would some of those changes would certainly take place.
Okay. And what type of background? I know that the DEA has some stringent requirements for joining them. What about the Marshal Service?
Marshal Service is pretty much the same, but the Deputy U.S. Marshal position is really a entry-level position.
Okay.
Having a background in law enforcement is not a prerequisite. It does help. It does make you better qualified, but it's not a requirement.
And do you also have to go through that extensive background search as well?
Oh yeah. Once you make it through the process, and our process is pretty much of the federal agencies' process are pretty much similar, in which you give an exam to separate those who can make it to the next step. Then you give a written exam. There's some other physical fitness requirements, medical requirements, and then once you get through that process, then the extensive background investigation begins.
And I assume there's also a training period or
Yes.
an academy that you would have to attend.
Yes, our training is done at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center down in Glencoe, Georgia. And it's comprised, it's a two-phase training. There is 10 weeks of what they call criminal investigation training, in which they're learning the basics about criminal law, civil rights, and things of that nature. And then they go through a 6-week Marshal Service basic deputy program, in which it's more centered towards what we do as Deputy U.S. Marshals on a daily basis.
And then what are the options from there? If somebody from the Virgin Islands were to be recruited as a U.S. Marshal, go through the academy, would they then be sent back here, or do they have other options to kind of branch out?
Well, no, just like anywhere else, once you are recruited, you have to put, it's kind of like your dream sheet together. You put in 3 locations that you would like to be in. And then once you get to that first location, you have a requirement to remain there for 3 years.
Okay.
Once that requirement is done, then you have the option of relocating to any district within the continental United States, including our headquarters element. But again, it's not a requirement. Just like my colleague mentioned, you have to sign a mobility agreement. However, for the most part, if you wanted to stay, say, in the Virgin Islands for 20 years, that possibility does exist as well.
Okay.
But again, we're in the process of revising our recruiting efforts and all of those kinds of things, and that may change, but as it stands now, this is pretty much the same. Are
you looking specifically for people who do want to stay here? Is that a need that you have now?
Well, one of the problems we have for the Marshal Service is that there are certain areas that are kind of what we call hard to fill. Virgin Islands happens to be one of them. Fortunate for me, a few years ago, we did what we call a Federal Career Intern program, where we recruited regionally. And we were fortunate that we were able to hire 2 local folks. I just brought them on a few months ago. They're just starting now. So that was good for us, because we're looking for people that have the commitment to stay. And it's like he said, it does benefit the agency when you have that local flavor in your agency.
When you know the area that you're
Exactly.
dealing with and the people that you'll be dealing
Yes.
with. Okay,
Sure.
well, that makes sense. Tell us a little bit about what your experience in the Marshal Service has been, any major highlights of your career.
Well, I don't know about major highlights. It's been different. It's been exciting. I've had the privilege of experience in a number of different areas in the Marshal Service. I was a member of the Marshal Service SWAT team, which is a special operations group. I started my career in Washington, D.C., which happens to be where I'm from. And I just done a caveat at the very end of different things. I was groomed in D.C. And was promoted to come here as a chief deputy. And it's been a pleasure. It's been exciting. I've seen so many different things. I've been able to travel and do a whole lot of different stuff, so it's been exciting.
Do you think that there's something unique to the Marshal Service that maybe sets it apart from the other federal law enforcement agencies? I mean, why the Marshal Service? You know, for somebody who's going to this career fair and kind of looking at everything, why would you encourage them to join the Marshal Service?
And I don't know that it's the Marshal Service is the Marshal Service. It's like the DA is the DA. We do what we do. They do what they do. The Marshal Service has probably the widest authority of arrest power throughout, compared to most of the other federal agencies, because we can arrest you for any crime at any time anywhere within the United States, as long as we're carrying our gun and badge. Most agencies can't do that because they're limited to what the confines of their duties are. But with so many different things that you can do within the agency, I think kind of sets us apart. Because like my colleague said, it was a kind of a one facet agency where they're really focusing on one particular thing. With the Marshal Service, you have, you have the court support, you have the fugitive apprehension, you have the witness protection program. We have so many different things that you can do within the agency, which provides a lot of different opportunities.
But do you guys ever work closely with the DEA and other federal agencies?
Oh, yeah. The Marshal Service is probably one of the biggest supportive agencies within the federal community, in that we support all different agencies. Like we have members assigned to the HIDTA Task Force. We have members assigned to the FBI Safe Streets Task Force. We have members assigned to the FBI JTTF. So we do a lot of different things in support of one another.
Okay. And what about the retirement? Is there an age cutoff as well that you have to retire by?
Yeah, the retirement's the same. You have to, in order to join any federal agency, you have to have not been more than 37 prior to you entering into whatever academy you enter, because you have to be able to give them 20 years of service, because we do have a mandatory retirement of 57.
Okay.
So if you are over 37 and looking to come into the federal government and you have no federal service at all, that's an automatic disqualifier for you.
Okay. So if you already have a job within the federal government or in a law enforcement agency and you are 37 or above, can you transfer into the Marshal Service, or is that difficult as well?
No, not in another law enforcement agency. It would have to be federal law enforcement,
Okay.
which you could parlay that time into federal time.
Okay.
So if you're, for an example, if you're a Virgin Islands Police Department officer, and you've been there for 20 years or 10 years or 15 years, and now you're 35 or 37, that wouldn't help you coming into the federal system.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Is there a minimum age requirement as well?
No, that's not a minimum age. The retirement system in the federal system is it's 20. You can retire after 20 years of service, and as long as you've made the age of 50.
Okay.
Or you can retire after 25 years of service and any age.
Okay.
But remembering, if you're young and you're retiring at an early age, there are still requirements that you have to make because of the retirement system of thrift savings, and there are certain tax concerns that you have to be aware of prior to retirement.
And how old do you have to be to enter the Marshal Service?
At least 21.
At least 21. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we do encourage you to come out to the career fair. When we come back, we'll have some closing statements and more information on Law Enforcement Career Day. Eye on the Islands puts the focus on local issues and events that affect you. I'm Sarah Lazama, inviting you to join me for some interesting conversation and timely information Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7 p.m. and weekends at 12 noon only on the Access Channel, local cable Channel 6 on St. Croix and Channel 10 on St. Thomas.
If you're looking for an exciting and fulfilling career that offers an experience of a lifetime, consider law enforcement. Come join the law enforcement professionals on Law Enforcement Career Day, April 7th at the UVI campus on St. Thomas, and on April 8th at the UVI campus on St. Croix. Representatives from 23 federal and local law enforcement agencies will be on hand to answer your questions. Law Enforcement Career Day is not limited to recent or soon-to-be college graduates, but open to all of the general public, and admission is free. Get the facts on an exciting career in law enforcement.
For more information on Law Enforcement Career Day, you can go to the Project Safe Neighborhood website at psnvi.com. Law Enforcement Day takes place on April 7th at the Sports and Fitness Center on St. Thomas and April 8th at the UVI campus. Both days start at 9:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. For Eye on the Islands, I'm Sarah Lazama. Eye on the Islands only on the Access Channel.